Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones isn't just sex and violence, it's also about politics. The show's title itself, A Game of Thrones, is clearly about the dynamics of conquest and preservation of power. And at playing this game, some characters are really good. Others are not so good. And today we'll talk about a particularly lousy character who, by the way, also happens to be one of the first victims of the creators' killing spree. I am, of course, talking about Ned Stark. Ned Stark, who is everything but a good political leader. We aren't here to judge him as a person. As a matter of fact, he's a rather attaching guy. He loves his kids and always has justice in mind whenever he acts. On a personal level, Ned Stark's nice and he's the kind of dude we may just want to hang around with. Or not. That constant pessimism about winter coming must get on your nerves after a while. Anyway, there's no wonder that he was one of everybody's favorite characters for the whole time he was alive. And as on top of it all, we felt like he was the only good person in a world full of liars, cheats, and murderers. No wonder either that everyone was so shocked when Lord Eddard, a model of righteousness such as the ones who always survive in most big productions, when he died, his head cut off by a spoiled brat calling himself a king. Except that, well, it was rather predictable, to be honest, because he's just the shittest politician ever. From the beginning until the very end of it, Ned Stark makes political mistake after political mistake, and as we all know it by now, it will be fatal to him. From the very moment he gets to King's Landing, he starts judging everybody and rubbing their nose in his own righteousness. He knows very well that the court is full of liars, manipulators, and traitors, and he doesn't want to be like that. Fair enough, except that he didn't have to be scornful to everyone. He makes it clear that he doesn't even want to be there, but accepted the Hand of the King job out of loyalty. Yes, because Lord Stark is loyal. So that's very honourable and honest of him, but again, it doesn't mean he has to act like a patronising douchebag to everyone, and especially to the people around him who are trying to help him because it's their job, not because they like each other, but because it's their job to rule the country together. So he confronts everybody and makes enemies on his very first day. Let's have a look at who. So first of all, there's Jaime Lannister, who's a knight of the Kingsguard, the army, basically. And being a Lannister, Jaime holds a certain power over it. As soon as they meet, Ned Stark reminds him how dishonorable this Kingslayer is because he stabbed the Mad King in the back. Then there's Varys, who sits on the small council, pretty much the government, and who clearly points out that they're there to help Ned Stark rule the kingdom for the king, and who's not taken seriously by Ned Stark himself, who just disregards him for being Master of Whisperers, concerned only with the rumours carried by his little birds. What a useful Master of Information to despise. And then there's Littlefinger, who as Master of Coin controls all the money matters of the kingdom, whom Ned Stark reminds an old feud between them because he was in love with his wife back in the day. And I need to point out that Lord Stark will even threaten him physically. And finally, to Pycelle, the Grand Maester, the old wise dude sitting on the small council, Ned Stark's first words are, "And you served another king last time we met," when Pycelle is basically just attempting to make small talk about the last time they saw each other. It's like, yeah, last time we saw each other, you served another king, you're a bloody traitor. Just imagine this. You get to work on your first day as Prime Minister and you manage to piss off the 4 pillars which you absolutely need to do your job. The army, the information, the money, and intellectuals. And that's exactly what Ned Stark does. Here I come, let me through so I can insult everybody. I'm Ned Stark and I've got the best of ways to make friends at my new workplace. No, seriously though, when you get to a new workplace, you don't just spend your days telling colleagues you don't even know what you think of them. You don't do that because you want there to be a nice working atmosphere, don't you? And in like 2 days, Ned Stark makes enemies by confronting the most important, the most influential, and the most powerful people in the whole kingdom. And that's like super clever when you know that everyone's a potential threat ready to stab anyone in the back. Well, Ned, of course they won't like you, and of course they'll betray you as soon as the opportunity presents itself. This isn't even politics, it's just common sense. Has, like, the guy never had human interactions or what? So yeah, first massive mistake, thinking he knows everything about people and he judges them from atop his honor. I'd say it's easy for a northerner who never had to rule in the capital to be all righteous and patronizing. It's a bit less easy to survive for more than one season, isn't it? Too bad if Lord Stark makes enemies. He'd rather be honorable, even if it means messing up the small council supposed to rule the kingdom, and whose purpose is probably a bit bigger than flattering each of its members' ego. Thank you, Ned. The peasants whose safety you're supposed to ensure are very grateful to you for what you do for them. So obviously, if everybody were just like Ned Stark, the world would be at peace and everyone would act fair play. And we may get a little bored too. But as Aemon Targaryen tells Jon Snow, Ned Stark is like one person out of a million. And the problem isn't so much Ned Stark's sense of honor, but rather the fact that he thinks that everybody should act as honorably as he does. The most striking and the craziest example of this attitude is, of course, when he goes up to Cersei to tell her that he knows the truth about Joffrey being a bastard and he's going to tell Robert, before urging her to leave and take her children with her because he doesn't want their bloods on his hands. But there's one thing, one tiny thing he just forgot. Cersei doesn't give a bloody fuck about being a good or honorable person. She wants, like all the other Lannisters, to sit as close as possible to the Iron Throne, and possibly on it. So we often tend to take the piss out of the bad guys in films who talk and talk and talk when they hold the good guy prisoner and could just kill him, but this is far worse. This is the good guy going up to the bad guy to give them a heads up about how they're going to screw them. I mean, isn't that just totally stupid? And it doesn't get better after that, because when everything goes nuts, when Robert dies and the matter of succession comes up, and bad luck, it's like the day after Ned told Cersei about his great plan to beat her, he'll still make the worst possible decisions, and the consequences there won't just be the little Game of Thrones in the capital anymore. This time, there will be war. Yes, war. I'm asking you, who triggered the War of the Five Kings, which will wreak bloody havoc on Westeros? You guessed it, Lord Eddard Stark. Because when he writes to Stannis to tell him Joffrey's a bastard and the throne is his by right, he gives him an excellent reason to raise an army and go to war to attack King's Landing. Besides the fact that nobody loves Stannis because he's freaking boring, probably even more than Ned Stark. Well, he's well far away at Dragonstone, and the situation has to be dealt with right here and right now. You'll say there was no other choice, that he was right to act accordingly with the legal order of succession. Well, no, sorry. Reality isn't that thing that we would like it to be, where everything we want to happen happens exactly where and when we want it to. You must also take into account the fact that there is a context, a situation in which you are. And it's not like he's got nothing to help him either. I mean, Robert made him protector of the realm before he died, which means he has the power, and particularly the power to act rightfully. But you can't just protect the realm by flaunting around a piece of paper. The only way to protect the realm is to make the right choices for the realm. And given the situation, there was only one right thing to do, at least if he really wanted to prevent the Lannister coup. And that solution was brought to him by Renly himself. Renly offers Ned Stark an army to get rid of the Lannisters and take Joffrey into custody so that Renly can rule, as he's seen by many people as a better ruler and a more legitimate candidate to the throne than Stannis or Joffrey. And Ned Stark can remain protector of the realm, preserve the peace of the kingdoms and his family's safety, and on top of it, have the court on his side. What else could you ask for? And instead, what does Honourable Lord Stark do? He'd rather make choices which will allow the Lannisters to take the Iron Throne, put his family in danger, and particularly his daughters Sansa and Arya, who are in King's Landing at that time, and trigger a war of succession which will last for years, spread across the kingdom and cause hundreds of thousands to die. Thank you, dickhead! At a time when he has to pick a side, and when that side should have been the safeguard of the peace of Westeros, he picks the worst side possible in that context. He chooses his own honor against his family, against peace, and against the common good. He chooses to disregard all probabilities and refuse all the cards handed to him, and through his death to unleash total and ultimate chaos. Well done! And why is that? Because Ned Stark is a man of honor, and his stupid sense of honor makes him someone who'd rather be good personally in a selfish way than act for the good. He'd rather feel righteous himself than do what is effectively right, which shows how little he cares about the common good in the end, which also shows how little he understands of politics. Because politics has nothing to do with being a good person, it's about doing what's right for everyone. Ned Stark is just all about people's personality and doesn't take into account the fact that you can be a right dickhead in your personal life and a very good political leader if you make sure that the people you rule for are fed and safe, for instance. The opposite is also possible. You can be a very good person, but a dreadful ruler, Ned Stark being a very good example of that. And that's exactly what Machiavelli said. That man's been terribly misinterpreted on that as well. Everyone tends to think that Machiavelli said you had to be a bad person to be a good politician. It's not true at all. It's just that Machiavelli wrote at a time when it was commonly accepted that you necessarily had to be a good Christian personally to be a good king. And what he said was that the two had just nothing to do with each other. He just thought politics was about doing what was right and not about being a virtuous or righteous person. And doing what's right, well, depends on the situation in which you find yourself, and on what you can do in that situation, and on how you take that into account to do the right thing. And Ned Stark's main problem is that he does not understand the situations in which he finds himself. He never takes into account the bigger picture of the common good of which he is in charge as Hand of the King. He just sees everything through the self-centered prism of his own honor and ego and doesn't care about the rest, which leads him to do the worst he can do in every situation: die, put his family in deep trouble, and most of all, trigger a war which will plunge the whole country into chaos for years to come. So, all in all, Ned Stark is an extremely interesting character to study because he literally is an epitome of what not to do in politics. So, if you wish to play the Game of Thrones, don't do what Ned Stark does. And I'd even say, if you do the exact opposite of what he does, you'll be certain you're playing it well. Dracarys.